All right, joining us today, Destin Daniel Cretton, Maui boy, guy I was lucky enough to grow up with and known the majority of my life. He's moved on to some bigger things, and by bigger, we're talking about movies, living in Los Angeles. His next movie comes out next week, August 11th. It's called The Glass Castle, based on a best-selling novel. Let's welcome him in. Destin Daniel Cretton, how are you doing?
Doing great. Great to be here talking to you, Mike.
Well, we're going to dive into the movie in just a second, but for those who aren't familiar, I want to kind of go over your background. We grew up in a town, both you and I, Haiku, Maui, 4,000 people, I believe, like when you and I were running through the dirt. What was it about growing up out there, essentially in the sticks, that kind of motivated you, pushed you, gave you the tools to go into your field?
I mean, I don't know how it was fully with you, but my mom didn't really let any of me or my 5 siblings watch a lot of TV, or play a lot of video games. So we were forced to be outside creating things and creating our own entertainment. So we spent a lot of our time building forts, making like martial art routines or putting on plays for my mom. And I think that was really instrumental in developing that part of my brain. I still feel like that my addiction to creativity comes from living in Haiku.
For a lot of folks who might not be familiar with all your work, I know your last feature, Short Term 12, you were able to enlist the help of a lot of your siblings, on screen, behind the scenes. How cool is that to be able to make a movie like that a family affair? And just in case I missed it, because I got a chance to watch The Glass Castle, were there any little hints of things, little hidden features in there that I may have missed?
Well, my sister Joy, who she still does all the costume design for me. So she was a costume designer on Glass Castle as well. And yeah, she has some little things hidden throughout that were from our home on Maui. Like I think Naomi Watts wears some earrings that I actually made out in the tent outside of our house for my sister for Christmas, and Joy just put them on Naomi Watts in one of these scenes. They're not very cool earrings, but they made it in the movie.
Well, it kind of fits Naomi's character anyway, but of course we'll dive back into that. You implement your family, like I said, into movies, but not just in help, but like when I watch a movie like Short Term 12 or even The Glass Castle, it feels like some of the characters are very familiar. Do you draw on your personal relationships when you're writing the scripts for these films?
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing about this story in particular, but Short Term 12 is also similar. I mean, there aren't any direct literal comparisons between those and my life, but there are so many things about these characters that feel very familiar to me. And particularly just this theme of family is something that I have connected to my whole life, because there's 8 people in my family and we're all really tight. We're far from perfect, but we through all the ups and downs, I think we just get stronger and tighter, and that's definitely something about The Glass Castle that I really connected to.
What was it about the novel itself when the idea was presented to you to work on The Glass Castle? Because you wrote the screenplay, you directed it, basically from start to finish, you had your hands in everything. What was it about that book that kind of spoke to you?
I mean, I think a lot of people in Hawaii, if they read this book, there would be so many moments where you're like, I went through exactly that. Like, I know what it's like to have buckets hanging throughout our whole house every time the wind shifts Kona, because our house is only built for trade winds, and when it goes Kona, all the rain just like, and I know what it's like to have, like, during termite season, just have like swarms of termites going up against the TV while we're trying to watch Mr. Rogers. and but we also had like 6 kids crammed into this tiny house out in Haiku, and it sounds like it could potentially be a horrible way to grow up, but it was the best way to grow up, and I have nothing but wonderful memories. We have really tough memories too, but together they kind of form this stew of a life that I feel like has really turned me into the person that I am, and I'm very thankful for that.
The movie, The Glass Castle, phenomenal performances all the way around. Let's start off with Brie Larson. You had a chance. This is your second time working with her on a feature film. What was it like the second time around? Did it, you guys already have this chemistry. You folks are friends already. What was that experience like?
I mean, it really was just like reuniting with an old friend. I mean, we'd been in touch since then, but I hadn't worked with her, so it was really cool to see her in her element and see all of these things that she's learned and honed since the last time we worked together. But I think more than that, it really felt like a family reunion for everybody, because we had a lot of the same crew from Short Term 12 were working together, my same DP, same composer, my same editor, and we were all, and my sister, obviously, and we were all just having tons of fun together, being stressed out together, but having tons of fun together and creating this story about family. As a family, creating that story was really cool.
What, if you can pinpoint one story from the set, like whether it was, equipment shutting down, bad weather rolling in, because you guys were all over the place and there's a lot of elements. What stood out as far as a memory you'll look back with the cast and crew like 20 years from down the line and be like, God, do you remember that?
I mean, when we were out in New Mexico, it was toward the end of our shoot, and the terrain there is just beautiful, and I'd never really been in a place like that before. And we were up on this cliff shooting a scene, and we were on take like 5 or so, and our line producer kept looking out into the distance and seeing these gnarly, dark gray clouds rolling towards us with little bolts of lightning. And I kept looking at it going, oh, that looks really cool. Maybe we can get it in the shot. But it came so fast that right in the middle of one of the takes, Woody's trying to do his line, and he lifts one of the kids on his shoulders. And as he does, it's like this gust of wind just like engulfed him with dust. And we had to cut in the middle of this take, and everything just started blowing. Just like huge gusts of wind starts blowing all our tents, and we had to shut down. And everyone said, run, grabbed everything and run. We jumped in the vans and went back to our base camp, and everyone had to get into this one trailer and sit there for 3 hours while we watched lightning bolts just like we had to wait for the lightning storm to pass. And I was like, how dangerous is it? Can I go outside? And they said, yeah, you can go outside if you want to die.
And you got like kids on set. It's not like no one's there trying to comfort you at the time. Oh man, you bring up Woody, and like I'm no Charles Lipton or anything, but I could tell that was an amazing performance by Woody. As you were watching him through your lens, what were you thinking? Were you just amazed at the performance that he gave? Because this whole movie is a great reflection of his range and his ability.
Woody plays a scene like a professional jazz musician, and it's really incredible to watch. So much of the shoot, I felt like I had a front row seat to the best show in town, and just being able to watch him do this thing that he's been doing his whole life, but to be able to watch it up close was really it just made me giddy, But what he does is like he'll start a scene and he'll go through it and he's just kind of feeling it out, and then a lot of times we won't cut and we'll just reset, do it again. And he goes through it again and he starts finding all these other new ways to do it. And the more he does it, he's just exploring a scene, and it's a really beautiful thing to see.
The performances, and I want to get their names correct, by Chandler Head and Ella Anderson. These two young actresses, they were amazing. Talk about them. Talk about the job they did.
I mean, Ella was the first person actually to audition for the role of young Jeanette, and before she walked in, I was looking at some of the words that this 11-year-old was going to have to say in these scenes, and I turned to our casting director and said, "Do you think there's an 11-year-old on the planet who can actually do these scenes?" And I started to panic because I thought maybe no. And Ella was the first one who came in, and she's like a very mature 30-year-old brain in an 11-year-old body. I mean, I have a lot of 30-year-old friends who aren't even close to as mature as she is.
They both stole the scenes. Would you agree? I mean, the scenes that they were in, they did a great job.
They were incredible, and Woody was blown away by Ella and her strength, and how much strength and vulnerability she was able to kind of allow to coexist in her through those scenes. And Chandler, I do owe a lot of the performances to Woody and Naomi, because they have such an incredible way of connecting with those kids, and a lot of their performances comes out because Woody is so engaged with them in the moment.
Your life as a filmmaker, you're always delving into a lot of other projects. How many projects at any given moment are you actually working on?
I mean, it might seem like a lot, but I only do one thing at a time, and which is kind of unusual for this industry, but it's something that I've found is necessary for me in order to survive. Because I am used to cruising at like a haiku pace, which is pretty chill, and I get a little crazy when that gets thrown off, and so I have to protect myself a lot in this wild industry, and one of the ways I do it is just by doing one project, and when I finish, I move on to the next.
So far, of your 3 feature films, you have they've kind of gone along the same path. Things that are a lot of self-reflection, things that might have a social, just social consciousness about it. Do you ever have any desire to do like superhero movies or something just completely off the grid that what we've seen so far? If you could make a movie right now that's so far from your current genre, what would it be?
I mean, I always thought it'd be cool to do like an action movie. That would be fun. Like, or maybe like a kung fu action movie, like a Karate Kid for our current age. But I don't know, man. I mean, one of my favorite directors is Ryan Coogler, and he started off doing Fruitvale Station, which is a very intimate, smaller movie. And then he went off and did Creed, which is a studio, sequel to the Rocky series, but I also find it to be a very intimate movie. And now he's doing Black Panther for Marvel, and that also has so many personal elements to it. So I'm not against doing a big movie, but it's also not something I'm just particularly chasing down.
So, action movie, kung fu movie. How about a kung fu anchorman from Haiku Maui?
Oh, yeah.
No one wants to watch that. No one wants to watch that. I'm sorry. That's a terrible idea. That's going to cost you all your credibility if you put it out there.
Kung Fu Cherry.
Oh, but I can only take down people with allergies to cherries. How about that? Okay, getting back on track, because I'm ruining your credibility.
I got no street cred to ruin, man. You're good.
You were talking earlier about your lack of vast of movie knowledge, but when you watch a movie,
Yes.
what kind of movies do you look for? Do you go to Rotten Tomatoes like the rest of us and be like, well, that's a 49%. I'm gonna pass.
I mean, it is tempting to go to Rotten Tomatoes, but I have been disappointed a number of times by certain movies that were, some of my favorites of the year that didn't score very high on Rotten Tomatoes. So I try not to trust it completely. But I like big crazy movies. Like I loved the newest Spider-Man. I loved the Planet of the Apes movies. I but I also love movies that allow me something to think about and talk about with the people I love afterwards. And a lot of times those movies aren't kind of those bigger tentpole ones. And so I think it's really exciting to look for things to connect with because there's so much right now.
What can you even dive into what your next project is, or what might be on the horizon?
Yeah, right now I'm working on adapting a book called Just Mercy, which is honestly it's one of the most powerful reads I've had in a long time, and it's about a young black attorney who moves down to Alabama in the late '80s to represent everybody on death row there. And it's written by an incredible man, Brian Stevenson, who is one of the most inspiring people I've ever encountered, and I feel, you know, equally as terrified as I am honored to be trying to adapt and turn this into a movie.
Do you like the idea of being able to take a movie from, as far as screenwriting goes, take it from almost the ground up, and rather than just being handed scripts and directing something and making notes?
I mean, I'm not against the idea of being handed a script to direct, but I haven't done that yet. And I think a part of it is so much of my enjoyment comes from the process of living in a world for a long time, and a world that I subject that I haven't really explored before. And so I, I choose the projects that I'm working on very carefully because I don't want to be working on something for 2 years that I don't find important to myself, you know? And I always want to work on something that I feel like in the end I come out a better person.
Uh, let's see. I guess as far as if you had to give anybody back here in Hawaii some advice, no matter where they're living, whether it's in haiku or, you know, uh, kahala, what kind of advice would you give them if they are interested in pursuing movies or just life in Hollywood itself? I mean, I know it's not easy, but what kind of advice would you give them?
I mean, the advice that I wish somebody gave me more often is to not be afraid or ashamed to be yourself in whatever you're doing. And for some people are natural talkers, some people are naturally able to tell jokes and be in front of a room. Some people are naturally shy. Or not wanting to talk to people if they're in a party. And there's nothing wrong with that. I found that in this industry, there are a lot of people who try to tell you what you need to be in order to make it. And I've found that every time I try to listen to them and become something I'm not, try to be that person who's not awkward in a party, because I am always awkward in a party. And when I try not to be, I look like a fool and I'm not myself. Um, but I've found that just being who I am, the slow paced like kid from Hawaii who loves to play make believe with his friends, and um, not worrying about always trying to be the coolest dude in the room. Once I've been able to try to do that, I think the work that I do becomes more honest, and I think that's the most important thing.
Well said. Destin Daniel Cretton. The Glass Castle comes out August 11th in theaters, especially out here in Hawaii, but everywhere. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So great to talk to you, Mike.